Welcome to the Blossom Mindset, a space for growth, reflection, and taking intentional steps towards the life that you want to create. I am your host, Lindsay, a behavior analyst, certified clinical trauma specialist, author, and entrepreneur. This podcast is here to support you in building self-awareness, reconnecting with your values, and moving forward with more clarity and intention. Together, we'll explore mindset shifts, practical tools, and meaningful conversations to help you work through challenges, realign when life feels off, and continue growing in ways that truly matter. As a gentle reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for any mental health or behavioral health treatment. I'm so grateful you are here and ready to start your personal growth journey. Let's get started. If you have been shutting down, avoiding things you care about, snapping faster than usual, or feeling like you are disappearing a little when life gets overwhelming, this episode is for you. I want to talk about those behaviors with a lot less shame and a lot more understanding because I think so many women and people in general are walking around judging themselves for things that may actually be signs of overload. Not excuses, not a free pass to avoid responsibility, but for information and understanding yourself a little bit more and what that means. Because there's a big difference between saying, this behavior is impacting my life and I want to understand it, versus immediately jumping to what is wrong with me. And I think that jump happens so quick for a lot of women, especially if you are an overthinking woman. I know I've been there. Sometimes I still do. And it's learning to shift back into the other mindset. Maybe you procrastinate and think, I am lazy, or you snap at someone and think, I'm mean, I'm a terrible person. You avoid the email, the application, the task, the hard conversation, and suddenly it becomes, I'm not disciplined enough, I'm failing. And before you know it, you are not only dealing with the original stressor, but you're also dealing with the shame layered on top of it. That shame can make everything feel heavier. It can make it harder to start, harder to repair, harder to ask for help, and harder to actually understand what is happening underneath the behavior underneath the surface. So today, I want to slow this down a little and look at these patterns through a nervous system lens, because sometimes the behaviors we judge most are not character flaws. Sometimes they are signs that your body is activated, overwhelmed, or trying to protect you. It may not be a skill deficit. It may be a dysregulated nervous system. So when we talk about stress responses, you may have heard of the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. I reference those quite a bit. We're going to delve a little bit further into those over, the next few episodes. And I want to keep this really simple and practical because I don't think we need to make this overly clinical for it to feel or be helpful. Fight can show up as snapping, irritability, frustration, defensiveness, or needing to control the situation. It is a feeling of being like on edge where one more thing feels like too much. Think fight is, I need to push back. It is not just aggression. It is not just, I'm throwing a punch and fighting back. Again, it can be snapping, irritability, defensiveness, and needing to control a situation. Flight can show up as overworking, overthinking, staying busy, that perfectionism, or constantly trying to get ahead of everything. And that one can sometimes be tricky because in some instances that flight can look productive. You might be trying to get things done, but internally it feels like urgency, pressure, and not being able to slow down. That's one example of flight. I know I was stuck in that for many years, but really think of flight as I need to get away. I need to get away from a situation. And sometimes it can look like productive. Maybe you are staying busy to avoid things at home. Or maybe you are just staying busy to even avoid internal thoughts of failing. Freeze can show up as procrastination, shutdown, feeling numb, stuck, or knowing what needs to be done but not being able to get yourself to do it. From the outside, freeze can look like not caring, but internally it may feel like everything is too much to even begin. Think of like freeze as, I don't know what to do right now. I don't know how to get started. And it's like you're stuck. You're a frozen icicle. And it can make it very difficult to move forward. Sometimes even thinking of it like almost like a couch potato, like you're stuck in the couch and it's hard for you to get moving and get started. Fawn can show up as people pleasing, over accommodating, saying yes when you mean no, over explaining, even abandoning your own needs just to keep the peace. It may look like being kind or flexible from the outside, but inside it can feel like that self-abandonment. Think fawn is, I need to keep them happy. I need to keep someone else happy in order to be okay. And I want to say this clearly. The point is not to label yourself and say, I'm a freeze person and I'm a fawn person, as that is your fixed identity. The point is to notice what tends to happen when your nervous system is under stress, to notice and understand what response you may typically fall under. Are you navigating multiple at the same time? It can also be another more complicated question, because a lot of times we are navigating from multiple at the same time. Because once your nervous system, or once you begin to understand your response and what your nervous system typically falls into, or whatever is happening in the moment and it falls into under the circumstances, you can then begin to work with it differently. Think about a female business owner who keeps avoiding the tasks that she cares about most. Maybe it's creating the offer, posting the content, following up with the potential client, sending the pitch, or recording the things that she keeps saying she wants to record. I'm calling myself out because I have done all of those things at a certain point in time, but here we are. We work through it. We regulate our system and we move forward in a meaningful way. From the outside, she may call it procrastination because yes, behaviorally, that is what is happening, but underneath it, there's that fear, that pressure, perfectionism, uncertainty, or even vulnerability that comes with putting something meaningful into the world. I've talked about this before, but with my podcast, it took me months and months behind the scenes until I finally released it. I had started it, I think probably that January of 25, and I didn't actually release it until August of 25. And then for the first few months, it was an episode here or there. It wasn't consistent because I was dealing with all of those feelings happening underneath and not knowing, was I going to get negative feedback? Were people actually going to want to listen? And even now, I still struggle with posting the video sometime. I don't think I've actually posted the full video, even though we have them. Getting more comfortable with posting like short clips of the videos because of that fear underneath. It shows up and presents as avoidance because behaviorally that's what it is, but it's not because I don't want to. It's influenced by those underlying internal variables. So if we think about it, if, that business owner is like, I'm lazy, we're just missing what the actual barrier is. Or even thinking about like the young adult shutting down over emails, bills, applications, appointments, or decisions. That task may seem small from the outside, just go and schedule the appointment. But internally, there may be too many steps, too much pressure, too much uncertainty or fear of doing it wrong. I see this so common actually with a lot of young adults and teens I work with that may be scheduling their own appointments. They're scared to call. They're scared to pick up the phone and call somebody because it's so much easier to do it over text. What do I say if the person answers? I have no idea what to say. What if they don't answer? How do I leave a voicemail? It's interesting because the world has shifted so much to like text that, voice calls can be very tough. So is it, yes, behaviorally it is avoidance. However, it is influenced by those internal variables. And even going back to the shutdown may not be a lack of caring. It may be that the nervous system needs more support, structure, and a smaller next step. There's probably something underlying internally that is happening that needs to be addressed. And even maybe that career-oriented woman who is holding everything together all day becomes more reactive over something small. That nervous system dysregulation, like we've talked about, that comment, a mess, a text, a change in plans, and then those thoughts pop up of, why am I like this? Why am I failing? Like, you've been holding it together all day. No wonder, like, your nervous system is shutting down now because you didn't take the time to regulate it throughout the day. That small thing in the moment, that comment, the text, change in plans, that small moment felt much bigger than it probably needed to be. And think about it too as you're navigating through life. Maybe the body has been overloaded since the morning. Maybe, you've been in back-to-back meetings, making decisions, responding to people, skipping food, ignoring your own body cues and pushing through all day. No wonder when that one small thing happens, there's no buffer left, no capacity left to respond. And that does not make a reaction okay if it hurts somebody. I want us to go back into understanding and taking more of an understanding approach. Because when something becomes understandable, when you understand what is happening within your system, then it becomes more workable. Then we can try and change our behaviors or our reactions in the future. Again, it doesn't mean reactions are okay if it's hurting somebody, hurting yourself. It does not excuse the action. But if we can take a step back and understand why that action is happening, we can build that self-awareness to know how to better respond in the future. Maybe my body needs a little bit more support right now. How can you give it to it? How can you help your body when you are so overloaded to respond better next time so we're not in the same predicament that we are in? And this, again, goes back to why awareness matters so much. I cannot stress that enough. I talk about it all the time, but that self-awareness is key. You cannot support a pattern you only shame. You cannot support a pattern that you don't know exists. If every time you avoid something, you attack yourself, you do not actually learn what the avoidance is connected to. If every time you snap, you spiral into guilt, you may miss the signal that came right before the reaction. And if every time you shut down, you call yourself weak, you're not learning what your body needed earlier before the shutdown. Awareness can give you a different starting point. Instead of asking, what is wrong with me? You can ask, what state am I in? Am I activated? Am I overwhelmed? Am I trying to escape discomfort? Am I frozen because the task feels too big? Am I people-pleasing because saying no feels unsafe or uncomfortable? Am I reacting from the current situation, or am I reacting from a full day of being stretched too thin? Even in last episode 2, we talk about those other variables, that sleep, that hydration, nutrients, hormones, all of that impacts it too. And taking a step back, especially females, we may realize, oh yeah, I was about to start my period. No wonder I was a little bit more moody. That's normal, but you have to have that self-awareness to look back and understand, I, maybe should have been monitoring. So next time, let me monitor and track. Let me support my system the way it needs to be supported. Again, it does not excuse the behavior. But to understand it, you can make changes moving forward. And that's where these questions can create that space. And that space matters because it gives you more room to choose what happens next. So what does support look like in these moments? And first, before you judge yourself, pause, even if it's only for a few seconds. Then ask yourself, what might this response be? What might my body be trying to communicate? If you are in fight, you might need to step away before responding more. Soften your body, take a longer exhale, or give yourself a little space before you say the thing that you cannot take back. If you are in flight, you need to slow the pace on purpose. Not stop everything forever, but interrupt the urgency. Choose one task instead of 10. Ask yourself what matters next instead of trying to outrun the discomfort with doing more. And understanding too, what are you trying to flee from? Do I need to flee right now? Or how can I come back and address the situation? Some situations we don't need or want to come back to, and that's okay. But if we're always in flight mode and never returning back, then we're constantly fleeing. So we need to understand why our body is fleeing, and is it trying to keep it safe? Or is it even just trying to avoid discomfort of tackling something head on in the moment? And sometimes, like I said, certain situations, flight all the way. There's going to be different situations, and not every situation or circumstance is going to fall into these categories in this episode. So again, think to what you need, what's important, because as we're talking through this, there's going to be more serious responses and triggers that are not going to fall into these, because you do need to keep yourself safe in certain moments and situations. And if you are in freeze, you may need to make the task smaller than your mind thinks it should be. Open the document, write the first sentence, stand up, send one email, put your feet on the floor, do one thing instead of trying to demand everything from a flooded state. Sometimes for me, when I'm like, all right, everything feels like a lot, I still have so much to do. Let me make a list of everything I need to do. Now I'm going to shift my environment, depends on what the tasks are, put on some music, stand up, and start with one. Not have the expectation that I'm going to do 5, but have the expectation that I'm going to do 1. And a lot of times, once I start to get that done, I have the momentum and I built the momentum to keep going. And that's can also be really, really helpful because I'm incorporating and shifting regulation into my environment in order to be more productive and deal with that overload. If you were in fawn, you may need to pause before the automatic yes. You might need to say, let me check and get back to you. That can feel very difficult sometimes if you are constantly in that fawn state. But it gives your body a moment to catch up before you commit to something you don't have the capacity for or something you don't even want to do, but you're just trying to make someone else happy. And across all of these responses, the basics matter more than we'd like to admit. Again, going back to the food, water, sleep, addressing the hormones, quiet, movement outside, less stimulation, a smaller step, and even contacting a safe person. And I know that those things can sound simple, but when your system is overloaded, simple is often what you need. It's not because simple fixes everything, but it gives your body enough support to access the right action. If you make everything too complex, your nervous system is already overloaded. It's not going to know what to do. It's going to be too complex for your nervous system to try and figure out. And this is where I like the phrase, regulate first, then solve. Not because we avoid the problem, not because we wait until we feel perfect, but because trying to solve from a flooded state usually leads to more pressure, more reactivity, and more shutdown. And you're not going to solve the problem effectively. Sometimes we do have to figure it out in the moment if we are not regulated or fully regulated, and that's okay. But if we can, try and regulate and then solve. Because sometimes that most effective thing you can do is create enough steadiness to take the next step, to understand what your body needs in order to move forward. And I want to reiterate this. Understanding your nervous system response does not excuse harmful behavior. It does not excuse unkind behavior. If you still snap, repair still matters. If you avoid something important, there may still be a consequence and you need to take accountability. If you people please and then become resentful, that is still a pattern to work on. You're making that choice to engage in those actions. And if you become resentful, maybe that's a reflection of a pattern you need to work on. Understanding your response is not about avoiding accountability. It is about giving yourself enough information to respond with more honesty and less self-attack. Because shame may make you feel like you are taking responsibility, but a lot of times it just keeps you stuck in that same loop. Honest awareness sounds different. It sounds like I was overwhelmed and I still need to repair. I was frozen and I still need to take one step forward. I was dysregulated and I need to still communicate differently. I was trying to protect myself, and I can learn a more helpful way to respond. That is the work. You have to notice what is happening in your body in order for you to shift the pattern and to create new patterns, create new habits with how your system is responding. Not pretending the behavior does not matter, but also not making the behavior mean that you are broken. So as you move through this week, I want to leave you with a few questions to reflect on. Which stress response have you noticed most in yourself lately? Are you more irritable and reactive? Are you overworking and overthinking? Are you shutting down and procrastinating? Or are you saying yes when your body is clearly saying no? Again, ask yourself, am I more likely to go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? What behaviors have you been judging that may actually be signs of overload? What tends to trigger shutdown, avoidance, or snapping for you? And what kind of supports would actually help in those moments? Not what would make it perfect, not what would magically fix everything, just what would help your body feel supported enough to take one honest next values-aligned step forward. Because the goal is not to become someone who never gets activated. That is not real life. The goal is to know yourself well enough that when activation happens, you can respond with care instead of shame. You can notice something is happening in my body right now. You can pause long enough to understand the pattern. and you can take responsibility without attacking yourself. Then that's when you can choose your next supportive step. If you don't understand what is happening, it's going to be hard for you to take a values-aligned step forward because you are not lazy. You are sometimes just overloaded. You are not always mean. Sometimes you are dysregulated. And you are not always unmotivated. Sometimes you are just stuck. And when you understand that, you give yourself the chance to respond differently in the future. It's not going to be perfect. We can't go and change the past. And I want to reiterate that too. You can't change actions that have happened in the past. And that's where repair can be really helpful, but still understanding what is happening so you can create shifts in how you respond going forward or in a future situation. But with more awareness, more compassion, and more support than shame could ever offer, I want to encourage you to increase that self-awareness, to notice what your body needs, and notice those signs of overload and how they are showing up in your body. Because if you do not understand what is happening internally, it is going to be hard for you to move forward, to grow, and to blossom. Thank you for joining in on this episode of The Blossom Mindset with me. I hope that our discussion has inspired you to take actionable steps towards blossoming into your fullest potential. Don't forget, the best way to show your support is by liking, sharing, and leaving a 5-star review on this podcast. Feel free to drop any ideas for future podcast topics by commenting on my most recent Instagram post of this episode. If you are interested in additional resources or one-to-one coaching, check out our website linked in the show notes. I am so proud of you. By tuning in and listening, you just took one small, actionable step forward towards blossoming into your fullest potential.